Hi, and welcome to the Spirit and Soul Healing Podcast. I'm Amy, and today's beautiful conversation is with my friend Jamie. And I really hope you enjoy this experience. In today's conversation, we spoke about holiday traditions and the seasons of time and the seasons of life and the deep meanings that can be felt in such experiences. And all throughout, I was feeling so much energy of love and comfort and peace come in. And I hope that you also can feel this, that it will be a blessing to you to listen to this episode, to connect in with her beautiful message, her heart spaced, heartfelt greeting. And Jamie just has a really magical way of speaking. So I hope you thoroughly enjoy. And I'm wishing you all a beautiful holiday season in whatever ways you might celebrate and wherever you are in the world. Welcome to the Spirit and Soul Healing Podcast, where we speak about all things related to spirituality, soul level healing, intuitive guidance, frequencies, and much more. I'm Amy Sikarskie, licensed vocational nurse, past life hypnotherapist, master intuitive energy healer, and a clairvoyant physical channel. Today's episode is brought to you in part by Spirit School Online, where we offer courses in energy therapy, free guided meditations, courses and information around learning to connect in with your spirit guides, and much more. You can find me at amysikarskie.com and offerings at spiritschoolonline.com. Hi, everybody. Welcome to the Spirit and Soul Healing Podcast. I'm Amy Sikarskie, and I'm here today with Jaime Mathis. And Jamie and I met a few months ago on a special trip to Sedona. We had a really strong connection and beautiful conversation. And I was so guided to bring her onto the podcast so that you all can also meet her and feel her magic and her love and really tune in with the information that comes through. So, welcome, Jamie, to the podcast today. How are you?
I am in full process. I have to say, every day is a new day, and the wisdom and the learnings that are coming in are day by day, step by step. So I am very open.
Beautiful. It's a nice place to be. Allows for change and messages.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yes. Before we get started, I was just wondering if you'd be able to share just a little bit about yourself with our listeners.
Absolutely. Well, it is so nice to be here. And like you said, Amy, we met under very magical circumstances and very synchronous circumstances in Sedona earlier this fall. And I actually come from the lands up in the Pacific Northwest of the Clackamas and the Multnomah people. And I was born up here in what we call Oregon, in the area of Portland now. And I am like a Pacific Northwest salmon. I like to tell people I've traveled the world following spirit and following the guidance and leadership of my heart. And I always seem to find my way back to these lands because they are great teachers, great grounders, and great healers for me. And so my background and training really ranges as far as my travels have. I'm a trained yoga teacher and breathwork and meditation teacher. I've taught yoga philosophy to teachers for years, and I also have background in academia. So I've got master's degrees in sustainability and leadership and theater and film and behavioral science. So I like to say if there's a liberal arts degree out there, I have it. And really, the path of my heart and trajectory of my life has been to live in accordance and step with spirit and with the divine. And I've been in a body for 43 years now. I've been through some really profound embodied initiations, starting with what we called cancer at the age of 8. Very much had a moment where I could have left the body and I chose to stay. experienced some spontaneous healing and have had initiations that have really run the gamut, but in terms of intensity, have always been right up there at like the
Mm.
peak, the peak of what humans can experience in bodies. So, again, just delighted to be here and wonderful to let the conversation flow and see what happens and what comes through.
Yeah, yeah. Oh, thank you for sharing a little bit of your background with the listeners and yeah, with myself too. I know we had spoken about some of your experiences, but I didn't realize it started the young age of 8. That's very impactful. Wow.
Yes, yes.
Wow. Yeah, yeah. Well, before we hit record, I was just chatting a little bit with you about, the holiday seasons and where my family comes from. I grew up really religious, and then having left a religious faith that was focused and centered on the holiday, it shook a few things up for myself as well. Um, like I would just want to say, like, I feel like I've lived so many lifetimes in this
Mhm.
life with all these like rebirthing cycles, and it's like who I was, I mean, even a year ago, but very strongly, definitely a new person than who I was in my childhood around the holidays. And so redefining what traditions are and what the magic of the season, recreating that this new magical moment, I would say. And then also with our family, and our children are older now. So I was pondering on the season coming up because it can be so energetically charged and a lot of emotions, and also space for healing, like releasing
Yeah.
and rediscovering. And so you came to my heart and mind to have on the podcast to chat about the sacred flow of the seasons and how can we get back to nature and what it really truly can mean to us, like in our heart and soul, away from programs that no longer fit us, and maybe create our own traditions or sacred special offerings and moments. And so this was the idea and the theme, the topic that came to me. And as we're beginning today, I just wanted to see if you could share a little bit about your holidays experiences and the seasons of change.
Yeah, beautiful, beautiful layup and question. I also grew up very religiously and within the Christian framework. And so there were, of course, many things I'm sure like you experienced that really held that container of the seasonal shifts. And I remember as a child really loving all of the natural elements of the changing seasons and traditions. So for at this time of the year, when everything's starting to get colder and darker, some of my favorite memories and traditions would be of going outside and collecting Christmas trees and of going caroling and
Mhm.
just feeling that change in my bones. And so now that I'm grown and I have a family of my own, the traditions and the idea of ritual really, really became more important and more front and center because, I started to realize how much shape they really do give in a world that feels chaotic so much of the time. How do we make meaning in a world where there's so much diversity and there's so much change and there's so much flux? How do we hook
Mhm.
hook into those patterns? And the natural world has been such a huge part of my life. I did grow up out in nature on acres and acres, just running free in the trees with my pony and you know in the streams and the creeks, and wandering out into some really, really remote places from a young age. And during several of the initiations of my life, notably when I finished university for the first time, and had just this moment of existential breakthrough where my mind was like, I cannot exist in this structure, this religious
Mhm.
structure anymore, in these traditions anymore. But what's next? What do I lean into and where do I lean? And what do I lean on? It was back into the wild that my feet and my heart took me. And
Mhm.
so, I hiked and I communed and I walked pretty much every trail in the Columbia River Gorge up here to heal and connect in with those deeper rhythms and those deeper traditions of being in a space and being in a place over time. And so, with my son now, who's 9, almost 10 years old, when he was young, I didn't want to inculcate him with intellectual traditions like, a faith tradition necessarily. I wanted him to have a very embodied sense of being at home in the world, because I feel like on many levels that is where one of our greatest disconnects comes from, is just feeling separate from, right? Whether it's God or whether it's our communities or whether it's the rhythms inside of our own bodies. Being in nature has always been something that has allowed me to come back to my own breath, come back into my own body in a way that fills it with a sense of wonder and something larger than myself, which I feel like is such a hallmark of being in relationship with the divine. That I took him out over the seasons to the same places while he was growing up, so he could feel in his bones, what does this space feel like when the sun is full? What does it feel like when the rains come and when there's water and when there's, you know, more
Yeah.
light or less light? And
Yeah.
so, yeah. And so, it's been really important to me with those traditions that have emerged, because I feel like we don't really have language around why traditions are important a lot of times, or why rituals are so vital to us being able to shape the chaos and
Mhm.
to shape the bigness. I really wanted to create for him and myself, as I stepped into this new space of relationship with something larger than me, that we could feel in our bodies, right?
Right.
Yeah,
Absolutely.
yeah.
Yes. Oh, that's so beautiful. Yes, that sense of knowing or feeling and belonging, a container that feels familiar and peaceful is such a beautiful foundation, and it's a loving experience. I remember, our time together in Sedona and how connected you are with the land. Now it's all making sense. It's just like, oh, it's just so beautiful. And those are some of my most, favorite moments. I didn't live on a lot of land. We had a large yard, but tried to spend as much time in nature as I could. And also for our children, when they were younger, we lived out in the country and had some acreage. And those are some of my favorite memories. It's like, and then you just go back, like you're saying, you touch that same earth and you feel it through the seasons. And it's such a visceral experience where you feel it and you're living and you're breathing with the elements. And to me, there is that honoring like the cycles of the seasons. For example, right now it's getting dark so much earlier. And I just feel like going to sleep with the sun. And
Yes.
those in my life in the modern world are like, that's so early. And I'm like, but my body is really like getting back in flow or
Yes.
rhythm. And
Yes.
so to all my friends that say, oh, Amy's a night owl, well, I might be an early bird now because things are shifting and I'm
They
honoring
are.
that. Yeah. Yeah. So that's beautiful. And you mentioned that you've traveled. Well, I don't know if you mentioned it now. We've
I did.
spoken. Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. I'm like, we've spoken about your extensive travels and working with the land and the earth and the experience. And I think that it's so beautiful because I know even when I've traveled over to Europe, there's a different vibration. But when you connect with Mother Earth, you can feel this deep, like intense, to me, it's this loving warmth that helps me go deeper within.
Mhm, mhm.
Yeah.
Yeah, there are places, and I don't know if you've had this experience, but in my travels, growing up in the Christian tradition and a very extreme form of it, when I went to Europe and when I started traveling in my 20s, my early 20s, actually late teens, that I would arrive in places and just know things.
Hmm.
There would be that sense of familiarity, or there would be images that would come to me about places and experiences that I'd had in these spaces. And I didn't have the language yet at that time for past lives or, other consciousnesses. But it was so, again, visceral and embodied that feeling the pulse of the land became this natural sort of way of putting down roots.
Mm-hmm.
And again, there are spaces on this planet that have particular vibrations and have particular energies that can be very feminine or can be very masculine or can be very energizing or can be very quieting and relaxing and peaceful. And places that I've been that I can just feel that there is agitation, for example, that needs to be healed or tended to. And it feels like that deep knowledge, that ancestral knowledge, the more that I listen to that and tap in through my breath and through getting my feet bare on the ground and letting my skin actually be in contact with these spaces and places, starts to reveal like the way forward, if that makes sense, right? Like
Mm-hmm.
when I was in Sedona with you, I was rolled out of bed every morning before sunrise by spirit, and I'm not naturally an early riser. I like to sleep in and get my rest. And yet every single morning it was like, out you go, Jaime, onto the rocks and listen and move and
Mm-hmm.
explore and feel. And that last day that we were there, it was particularly poignant because I went all the way around the Red Rock by the place that we were staying, just being led forward, Um, and there was one rock that jumped out at me, and it just had this song that needed to be sung. And I put my hand on it and I opened my mouth and I just let this tone and these words that this body and brain don't understand, but like the spirit
Mm-hmm.
understood. And it changed. It changed the vibration of the land. And in my body, it was almost like when you take the pressure cooker off,
Yeah.
and the pin drops, and you're like, oh, okay, I can open the lid now. I can continue to pass on this way. I have so many experiences like that from walking and being on the land all over the planet,
Yeah.
where it's like, oh, incredible, just that feeling of connectivity and the lines, that thread around the earth. I don't know how much you know about ley lines and the energy bands and everything, but they are real. I feel them, you
Yes.
know. Uh, and stones are such a powerful conductor of those energy pieces that it's like, wow, you think about some of these spots and spaces where traditions have been rife throughout the different faiths and philosophies, like Stonehenge, for example, or Skara Brae, or places in Turkey like Derinkuyu, the underground cities, or Göbekli Tepe, which is one of the most ancient standing stone sites that they've found, tens of thousands of years old and probably older. And it's like these stones are actually like the acupuncture needles for the earth that are stimulating the different chakras and stimulating the different energy centers and bringing forth those vibrations and that wisdom and that energy. And so I think I kind of wandered off on a tangent a little bit
Oh, I
here,
love
but
it.
yeah, we have access to the wisdom that we need to heal and balance through the earth, if we're willing to get out on her and listen in different
Mm-hmm.
in different specific ways, right? That our,
Mm-hmm.
our bodies know. They know if we can quiet them enough to be able to let those channels commune.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yes. Yes. And I'm thinking back to my childhood and experiences around the holidays, similar to what you were sharing. The ones outdoors with nature are the
Mhm.
ones that have stayed with me and that were the most impactful. I would say that, and then singing. So
Yes.
music.
Yes.
So the music. And I'm looking for songs. I'm enjoying songs. Some of the songs now that are the traditional Christmas carols and songs. I'm like, okay, I think I've healed some of that agitation that was in me as I was healing and releasing
Mm.
the religious part of
Mhm.
it. But I'm
Mhm.
really looking forward to music that isn't so dogmatic and
Yes.
that sings to my heart. And so bringing that into our holiday traditions. And I think that, when we look back, I guess I know that when we look back at these holidays, a lot of them began actually in more pagan holidays
Mhm.
that dealt with connecting with the spirit of the earth and the land. And so it makes sense. It's a natural part of that natural rhythm and flow that we feel,
Mhm.
throughout the year, every season of change that also supports us as we grow in our age. You and I are the same number of human years.
Yeah.
We've been through all these cycles and the ebbs and the ins, the flows of it. Um, and so nature has always been a place for myself as well, where I can clear my mind and heart, reconnect with the earth, and you feel that any of the chaos swimming around and the outside aspect of the aura and my mind just settles away when I
Yeah.
can get on the land.
Mhm.
Um, yeah, and you've shared a lot about rocks and stones. Is this your favorite element, or what is your favorite part of nature?
Oh my gosh, that what a beautiful notice. I have my bathtub that I use as one of my ritual spaces, right? That
Mhm.
almost every day I am in that water and I am
Mm.
letting it cleanse me. And I have my salts that I put in there, and I have collected stones from all over the world. I mean, my house is decorated with rocks and plants. And I have these stones that are encircling me
Mm.
that sometimes I'll bring into the water with me, and sometimes I'll just let hold that space around me. And so my eyes are always. They're always looking down, they're always looking for the rocks. And I love to tell my son and anyone who cares to listen when we're out in nature, just think about what these stones have seen,
Yeah.
like think about the stories that they could tell, especially in some of these spaces that are so clean, like Sedona, right? You just
Mhm.
have these red rocks that are so stripped and are so open to the sun and to the wind and the rain and the snow. And it's like this land has looked different over the course of life on this planet. Water,
Mhm.
water was here, lots of it, right? Like, and the stone remains and retains all of that memory and sort of shows those stories of change and how we can be both grounded and ascendant at the same time and be
Mhm.
polished by the forces of change and the different elements into these things that are so multifaceted and are so beautiful and are so useful, that will continue to evolve and be shaped over the course of their shape, as these stones, whether big, huge monoliths like the red rocks in Sedona or like the smaller pieces that you pick up on the beach. And so, yeah, I could wax poetic for hours and days about stone, but I love all of the elements for their own reasons. And one of my traditions and favorite places to be is standing high atop mountains and windy spaces.
Mhm.
I'm an Aquarius Pisces cusp, and so there's that air and there's that water that are so much a part of me, but I'm also a Capricorn rising. So I have this like real deep desire for the earth and for the stones and for the two-dimensional, because that's really where the two-dimensional exists, is like in the rocks and the
Mhm.
minerals and the tiny things that live underneath us and around us that we just take for granted as being these steady things that are actually just primordial, huge forces that are the foundation and the skeleton
Yeah.
of our human lives on Earth. Mm-hmm.
Oh, wow. Oh my gosh. Thank you so much for sharing this. I was just going in with my mind. I'm like, oh, I have some rocks I've collected. How about, yes, let's put them in the bath. That sounds
Yes.
amazing.
And see what
Actually,
happens.
yeah, I have some rocks, some little pebbles I got from the river, and actually feel like one day I'll take them back because I always feel like that. But I'm like, just come home with me for a minute, and I have them in a dish and I pour water on them because I feel like
Yeah.
they want the water, so they would love to take a bath.
Yes.
And it's so healing, and there's something about it that I really don't have words for,
Mhm.
but just that it helps me to anchor. So I guess that's my word. It helps me to anchor to the earth when the water's coming through and purifying the energy, physical, but energy too is being cleansed. The rocks help me to stay grounded and anchor. And one of my favorite elements is the wind. I think that's my most favorite. So
Yes.
standing on a mountaintop with the wind. Yes.
Yes. Yes.
So I need that grounding so I don't fly away.
Uh-huh.
But yeah, so when I think in my mind about like when I feel into nature and seasons and this particular holiday, I think of it's funny, I do think of rocks. I think of the pine cones and I think
Hmm.
of the tree branches that we would make, um, what is it called? Gosh, I can't even think about it. What's it called?
The
Garland.
swag, the
The
swag
swag.
cigar.
Yeah,
Yeah,
the
yeah.
swags of Garland. Yeah. So I think of that. And for the most part, we just do artificial tree if we do a tree. Some years we haven't done a tree. But I do artificial tree, or I'll get a little plant that I can keep alive year round. I
Hmm.
just have a hard time personally like cutting down a tree, putting it in my house. I
I
do.
know. I understand that. And for the first Christmas that I had Espen, who's my son, I bought a tree that we kept in our house, and then I've tended it all of these years. It's 9 years old. It's living outside my front door now. And it was really difficult for me to consider like cutting down the lungs of our planet. And then I started to really think into those traditions, right, from childhood, because one of those was going out into a Christmas tree farm and
Mhm.
and finding our tree and
Mhm.
going out there with my sisters and my parents and being in the mud and putting the boots on and getting down on our hands and knees and really bowing to this tree, to this living being that was going to give its life to bring growth and to bring renewal and life into our home in the time of the year when everything is lying fallow, when death is really the predominant theme, right? And the
Mhm.
end of things and what happens during that resting period, because it seems like nothing, right? Like that's the fear with death and with transitioning into the non-physical for a lot of
Mhm.
us, is that it stops, that consciousness stops, or that our ability to interact with the bigness stops. And
Mhm.
having that tree, that living tree, sort of mimicking that life cycle of embodied things as an adult then became this really, really powerful living metaphor of it being all right to go through the complete life cycle. Because I have been so close to leaving the body so many times and have found it to be such a profound, transformative portal that is misunderstood and intentionally obfuscated and kept from us on so many levels by the powers that be, and whatever the prevailing norms are, that we really we miss that opportunity to really delve into the traditions of grieving.
Mhm.
Because
Mhm.
what is it to grieve? To grieve is to praise something that we've loved and lost through our emotions that flow like water and fire and wind, and that pit in our stomachs that is stone, that is that like deep
Yeah.
loss, because taking the tree out after having had it be in the home and smelling the beautiful scent and seeing the lights on it and being able to decorate it with all of these totems and memories was very sad for me, like watching it go from being this green, fresh, living thing to being dried out and dropping its needles and like,
Mhm.
you know, but
Yeah.
it's like that's part of being in a human body is learning how to grieve and allowing those emotions to flow so that we can be renewed like the coming of the spring when things start to flow and start to move and start to sprout again. Otherwise, we get stuck. We get stuck in an appended ritual and tradition where it must be only life and only growth and only expansion all the time. And that's what has gotten us to this space that we're now
Mm.
in, right? This confluence or this crossroads where it's like, no, we can't just grow forever in this form. There has to be change. There has to be surrender. There has to be a period of dormancy before there can be renewal and evolution. And we see this in our own lives coming
Mhm.
out in janky ways for most of us, right? Because we don't know. We've
Like,
forgotten how to
oh,
grieve. Yeah.
yeah. What's this? Yes. Yes.
Yeah, and it is so big. Grief is one of those things that is so overpowering, that when it gets stuck in our bodies, we don't have the traditions and rituals to be able to move that out, and so we get sick,
Hmm.
right? Or
Hmm.
we become mentally disturbed, with depression or anxiety, or we have it show up in our physical bodies in the term of pathogens or chronic illness or whatever. And so for me now, I go out and I find those trees in the winter time. And I've started taking my son out into the wildlands. You can get permits to
Okay.
to cut a tree up
Okay.
here in the Pacific Northwest, right? And so I take him out on these treks and we go into the snow and we go into the forest and we find the tree and we thank the tree. We ask for its permission first to take its life and for it to be this transmitter of this profound tradition of life cycle. and then
Hmm.
and then we cut it and we take it back with us and we
Hmm.
appreciate it and enjoy it, and when that time in life is over, we take it out into our backyard, into our gully, and we let it become food again for the other things that are in
Mm.
the growing state. Yeah.
Yeah. Oh, wow. Thank you for sharing all of that. It's really giving me another perspective. Um, Yeah, thank you. It's opened up a whole new a whole new way of looking at it and actually like feeling that reverence of it. And I think that because where I'm at in the city, it's a different, I think that what's the disconnect is being one with nature and the land. And of course, we can then create our own traditions around it because
Mhm.
where I'm at, it's a little bit more commercialized. And then how do people, at the end of the tree, they put it on the curb, right?
Yeah.
And that's like, oh, heartbreaking. So when I think back about like how it all started, um, a lot of our ancestors were living off of the lands. And my father-in-law, his whole family grew up on a farm up in the UP Upper Peninsula and of Michigan and lived on the land. And they had a wood burner, so it was like then you're living with nature and the elements and it's keeping you alive. You get that fire element there. And so if I were to be more on the land, I think it could help me. But now that you've shared this a little bit, I can see where those of us that are in the suburbs or the cities can intentionally create our own sacred ceremony and moment with the trees. If we decide to have a live tree come in and go through the process that you've explained, and of course it might look a little bit different, but
Yeah.
we can still connect in, we can still bring gratitude, still
Mhm.
bring, our heart and soul and go through that process. So I really appreciate you sharing. Sharing with that, like another way to think about it, another way to use your intentionality and be present in the moment at a season of change, at a season of a holiday. That's beautiful. Yes, because as I mentioned, everything that really has stuck with me are aspects of nature and elements and seasons. So leaving the candles for fire or having incense, having something with maybe some of the scents of the season, the spices. Do you
Mhm.
have any other favorite parts of the seasons that you bring into your newly formed tradition, your sacred moments?
Yes, that's such a good question and such a lovely notion too of having the different senses be involved. I feel like one of the big homecomings or remembrances that I've had is just the importance of honoring each one of the portals that we have in our bodies, of being able to connect
Mm,
with the three-dimensional, right?
yes.
So what can I smell? What can I see? What can I hear, taste, touch through these changing seasons that helps to anchor me in place here on this land, on this ground, whether I live in the suburbs or whether I live in the city? Can I see the moon?
Mm,
The phases of the moon,
yeah.
like that's something that I can absolutely do much of the time, is get to a place where I can observe her as she's shifting through those cycles and seasons. The smell element. I mean, I ended up marrying a Danish man, and they have, I feel, a lot closer relationship with some of these seasonal traditions outside of
Mm,
specific philosophical or religious ideas, because they do live farther north. And so the extremes are a lot more obvious. So
yeah.
when it's dark, it's dark. So they have this concept called hygge, and it basically translates to mean coziness. And
Mm,
it is this cultural value, right? Like, it doesn't matter if it's summer or whether it's winter, you go to gatherings and you make sure the hygge is on point. So that means longer gatherings. Like,
mm.
you would never go to hang out with a Dane for 2 hours. Like,
Oh,
that would never
yeah.
happen.
No.
It's like you block out the day, and there's food and there's drink and there's songs and there's movements, that you do. And so in the winter time, they have this thing called glögg. And it's basically a mulled wine. So you've got the red wine and you've got the spices like nutmeg and allspice and cinnamon and oranges, and so that infuses things. And you have these dishes like rice. It's a rice pudding, risalaman, where you have an almond that gets hidden somewhere in the rice porridge, and whoever finds it like wins a bar of chocolate or something like that. So it's really these gatherings include and involve all of the senses, and that's something that I've really been incorporating into our family traditions as well. So even if they're gatherings, like I take my son to see a play every year, the Christmas revels, right, which are built around the idea of solstice and built around the idea of the winter season and like the returning of the light. And so that's something that we can do that engages both our sight and our sound and all of
Yeah.
this, and allows us to travel through this life cycle and this seasonal cycle. And so, that's something that we like to do, as well as creating the different foods and like working from what's locally available.
Hmm.
Right, during the time of
Right.
year, is like eating seasonally as well can become a real tradition. That's such a lovely way, not only of honoring the passing of time, but also creates some beautiful shape and habits of consumption and being in relationship with the resources that are around us, that also support, the farmers and the land itself, right? Because the things
Yeah.
that grow it in the different seasons actually actually help regenerate and rejuvenate the land if done in a sensitive and regenerative way.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Yeah. So it's really cool for me as I spend more time in a body to kind of think through what are the ways that are available to me very close at hand that I can actually, use to anchor me in place and anchor me in my body over these cycles of time that my children and my friends and my family can take with them also, that just again gives that sense of holding, right? And
Mm-hmm.
gives that sense of togetherness and relationship, of reciprocity and interbeing, because feels like so much of the time many of our traditions have become very individualized, whether it's like the buying of presents, even though we do
Yeah.
that for other people. It's like, what if we make presents for each other? What if we learn to use our hands in ways that are simple and accessible, like, dipping leaves in beeswax, right? And just letting those kind of perfume our space and add beauty that we can collect in the parks and like on our walks and things like that, that we can do with our children and we can do with our friends and our family, that actually bring us back into that relationship with each other, and with the land too. We know how to do all of this stuff. We really do. It's just shifting that mindset and that heart set to being willing to see things in the natural world as our relatives instead of something apart from us.
Mm-hmm. It's so beautiful. And I was, as you were speaking, I was seeing this expansion of energy that expands through spring and summer, and then it feels like it contracts or, kind of comes back to home in the autumn and then winter time, that cycle. And I'm
Mhm.
seeing where we're at right now. Our children are both adults and have moved, and they come home for the seasons. So as a mother, I'm feeling like hugging and snuggling and, oh, you guys are here, and like that warm heart space time together where
Mhm.
it's not about presents. Like we do presents too, but it's about the time and the moments and the memories and the activities
Mhm.
that we have. And then that release of, okay, go out into the world, and
Mhm.
then they can hopefully continue to come back for holidays, or maybe we go to them. um, and so just as you were sharing these moments and the messages that were coming through, I was getting that. I was feeling that, like, okay, things are seasonal and life has seasons and changes. And
Mhm.
it's about the intentionality and how present we are and how those traditions are, I guess, like rebirthed. I would like to say they're
Yeah.
rebirthed. So we take a little bit of aspects of what we had growing up. And although my whole perception of the world and life and religion and spirit has, pretty dramatically shifted. I can actually see how we go back, and it always leads me back to nature and to love and to family. And
Mhm.
like you were saying, longer than 2 hours.
Yeah.
Not really that long to, get much of a good conversation going or to be present with those that we love. So yes, especially when it's our, right now, like with our adult kids away, when they come home, it's like 2 hours. That's not really enough time.
No, no, no.
No, or our loved ones that we haven't seen for a while, friends that live a distance away. It's like, let's spend the
Yes.
whole day together. And so that
Yes.
heart-spaced moment of it, and doing the activities like you mentioned with the leaves, things in nature. Nature walks are so wonderful, and baking. Some of the best memories we have are baking with our kids when they were younger, and just keeping that tradition going, every
Yes.
season, every holiday. Yeah. Is there anything else that's coming through for you?
Well, I feel like the idea of homecoming and the idea of resensitizing ourselves and our family and our community to being in space over time is such a precious gift that we have had access to since COVID, especially,
Mhm.
where, in this very fast paced, like high turnover culture that we live in, 2 hours still feels like a really long time. But how do we cultivate that stamina to be able to be witnesses to each other's growth and life cycles for longer than 2 hours, because families and old friends and people that we have had in our lives for a really long time, one of the great gifts that they bring us is that witnessing, and is that
Mm-hmm.
longevity and those cycles that they have observed, because we are such profoundly relational beings that we mirror, each other. I am, therefore you are. Really needs time to be able to develop. And so
Mm-hmm.
for those of us who are aware of these life cycles and are aware of sort of these seasonal shifts and the gifts of spending time in place, we are sort of the stewards, or like the handmaidens or the matriarchs of creating the spaces and creating the intention and the activities for being able to help our family members and our friends resensitize to just getting comfortable with being grounded in time.
Mm-hmm.
So, when you were describing some of those lovely impulses that you have to be with your children and snuggle them and take nature walks and bake, my immediate thought was, and so these are schedules that we can create, right? Where it's like maybe we organize it by something that we're going to really focus on our eyes, like we're going to go out on a nature walk, right? And we're going to really observe the things that have shifted and changed. What do the trees look like now as opposed to in the summertime? What animals do we notice? What colors are there, right? And then
Right.
maybe we shift after that into smell and taste. Like then we go in and inside the in breath, and we do the baking, and we do the eating and the nourishing of our bodies, and kind of giving shape to the day or to that time by using the senses that
Yes.
we have access to. So it doesn't matter where you are on the earth, you have these senses and you can
Yeah.
use them to sort of create these rituals and these traditions that can change, right? Because you may be who knows where in 5 years, and your
Right.
children may be who knows where, but like you're always going to have this body, right? They're always going to have the body. So you can just use that to be infinitely creative and adaptive with those traditions evolving, but still having the same heart, right? And
Mhm.
still having the same mirror. And so that just feels really, really important as we think about tradition and how to create those in this fast paced world. And with whatever background we come from, it's like we have all the tools we need here, right?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. Oh, wow. I love how you put that. You recapped it so beautifully. Oh my gosh. Thank you. Yes. Yes. I'm just sitting here listening and getting visions and feeling into it. And I think that's really what it's about. We have traditions that we, maybe some of us are really set in those traditions and they work perfect for us. But those of us who have found that our life has shifted and the old way of celebrating a holiday, it just doesn't quite work for us. So, this aspect of coming back to the senses and to love and to nature and being present, so important. And then we can create our own traditions, something to me that feels deep and long lasting versus a quick, superficial fix. Like, okay,
Mhm.
well, if I buy all the gifts and give you the gift, I'm going to check it off
Yeah.
my list. That's not really that heart space. To me,
No.
you can make it heart space, but for the most part, it's not.
Right.
It's very much like to do. And so, yeah, being present and being with the ones that we love. And so I'm hoping that just our conversation today around this awareness has inspired others, maybe had some listeners think about their own traditions and ways that they can enhance, or even like the gratitude that I feel for certain things that I've had in life, and that reverence is
Mhm.
so like, oh, so deep. And also, that's an aspect of this time of the year, is that going within. And I like to journal and I like to spend
Mhm.
time just thinking, like the bath, or the
Mhm.
walks in nature. I'm really holding those treasured moments in my heart. So some of us might really, really value and take the time to value all of the gifts that the holidays have given us and that life has given us. And then if there's anything lacking, we can say, well, how can I enhance that? Or what might be another element to share with my family or my friends or myself moving
Mhm.
forward? And I just think it's really important, like you said, no matter where you are on the earth, we'll always have our senses,
Mhm.
can always have our memories and tune into that vibration.
Yeah. Yeah. Absolutely. Absolutely. And I feel that as we become resensitized and we feel our way back into some of these really earth-based traditions that have been underground or unconscious for so many years, not everybody's going to want to come along, or not everyone's going to understand. And so really like bringing that vibration home in yourself, bringing those traditions home in yourself is going to be such a profound gift, even if they're like, why are we going on a nature walk? Well, it's okay. It's all right. Because like when I'm regulated and I'm connected, it has a ripple effect,
Yes.
So it's like start here first. And then, you know,
Yeah.
it'll share out.
It'll
It'll
share
share out.
out. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. And as an adult looking back, I'm like, wow, I really value that. As a child, I never thought much about, some of the things, mostly the
Mhm.
nature walks and the fires. My dad would go camping, he'd make the fires. And now I'm like, oh gosh, a campfire. Oh, that feels like so
Yes.
good. I love those memories.
Yes.
So the things that we might maybe discount now can have a long lasting memory. And that with
Yes.
memories come emotions, and that love is like always felt. So
Yeah, yeah, incredible and interesting. When you say you didn't have to think about it, that's exactly the point of using our senses to connect with some of these rituals and traditions and seasons, is that we just get to foster that love relationship with our children and with our friends and family when we just take them into activities and take ourselves into these experiences, not the thoughts but the experiences, because we protect what we love, we nourish what we love, and we love by being in relationship with and being able to observe over time, and so you're just living proof, and so am I, that it works.
it works.
Yeah,
Yes.
yeah,
Yes. It does. It does. Aw. Well, thank you so much, Jamie, for having this wonderful conversation today. For those who would like to work with you, because you offer some amazing gifts to this world, do you want to share a little bit about your services and how they can find you?
yeah, absolutely. Right now, my services and my website are under construction because I'm going through a rebirth myself.
Mhm.
But I am a coach and an intuitive channel. I also work with people outside in nature and use the beauteous gifts that nature offers to connect back into our true selves. I'm a hand analyst as well. So, using again the information that is at the tips of our fingers to help reconnect us with our true soul purpose and what we're here to do, is one of the tools in my toolkit. And so a good way to connect with me is just reaching out via email, which we'll have in the link or in the information about the podcast. And if you have any questions, of course, you can always just reach out as well. And it's been such a pleasure to chat with you today, Amy, and so lovely to talk about such an important topic.
Oh, thank you so much for being here. And I do want to share with everyone that your hand reading, your hand analysis, intuitive reading that you shared with me
Mhm.
was just so amazing. Like it provided a lot of information and healing and aha clarity moments. So thank you. So if anybody's interested, Jamie is a strongly gifted intuitive, and she uses the hands to connect in, and it's like so profoundly beautiful. So I'd really encourage you to connect with her. So thank you so much, Jamie, for being
Yeah.
here. And I'm wishing you so much love and magical happy holiday seasons.
Thank you. And you too. I hope you're able to get outside and connect with that lovely family of yours and with all of the beautiful changes happening in the natural world.
Yeah, thank you for
Okay.
sure. And thanks to our listeners. We'll see you all again on the next episode. Bye bye.